Welcome, everyone. Today, we're going to explore an intriguing topic: microorganisms, friends and foe. This is the first slide of our journey together. Over the next few minutes, we'll discover how these tiny creatures can be both beneficial and harmful. So let's dive into the fascinating world of microorganisms and see what they have in store for us. Let's take a quick look at the contents of today's chapter. We will start with an introduction to microorganisms, also known as microbes, and understand their significance. Then, we'll explore the different types of microorganisms and delve into viruses, which are a particular type of microbe. We will also discuss the medicinal uses of microbes, as well as their role in industries like food preservation and agriculture. Next, we'll examine harmful microorganisms, those that cause diseases in humans, animals, and plants, and how they impact our health and environment. We'll look at ways to control and prevent these diseases, including the use of vaccines and antibiotics, along with precautions to take when administering medicines. Additionally, we'll cover beneficial aspects such as the commercial use of microbes, their role in increasing soil fertility, and their importance in the nitrogen cycle. We'll also talk about how we can clean the environment and prevent the spread of harmful microbes. Finally, there will be activities and questions to help reinforce what we've learned, and some sections will involve completing tables to organize information clearly. Throughout this presentation, remember that microorganisms are everywhere. They can be both friends and foes, and understanding their roles helps us harness their benefits while protecting ourselves from their harms. Microorganisms are all around us, even though we can't see them with our eyes. They're incredibly tiny, which is why they're invisible to us without special tools. You might not realize it, but these tiny organisms are everywhere, in the air we breathe, the water we drink, and even in the soil that plants grow in. Understanding that microorganisms are present in these environments helps us see how interconnected life is and why they play such a vital role in our ecosystem. This sets the stage for the rest of our discussion on their importance and impact on health and the environment. Microorganisms, or microbes, are incredibly tiny organisms that you simply cannot see with your naked eye. You need a microscope to observe them. These microorganisms can be either unicellular, meaning made up of just one cell, or multicellular, consisting of many cells working together. Sometimes, they exist alone as single cells, and other times they form colonies, which are large groups of microbes living together. For example, have you ever noticed how moist bread gets spoiled during the rainy season? You might see greenish-white patches on its surface. That's a colony of microorganisms, specifically fungi or bacteria, growing there. Understanding these tiny creatures is really important because they play such a big role in our environment, health, and even in industries. So, as we continue, keep in mind how these microbes are everywhere around us, often unseen but incredibly influential. Now, let's explore the different types of microorganisms. There are 4 main categories that we typically focus on. First, we have bacteria, which include familiar examples like lactobacillus and E. coli. These tiny organisms are everywhere and play a crucial role in our environment and health. Next, we have fungi, such as bread mold, penicillium, and aspergillus. These are important in both nature and industry, especially in food production and medicine. Viruses are also considered microorganisms, but they're a bit different. They can only reproduce inside a host organism, whether that's bacteria, plants, or animals. That's why they're responsible for common illnesses like colds, the flu, and coughs. More serious diseases, like polio and chickenpox, are also caused by viruses. Moving on, we have algae, including species like Chlamydomonas and Spirogyra. These are mainly aquatic organisms that are essential for ecosystems, producing oxygen and serving as food for many aquatic creatures. Finally, there are protozoans, such as amoeba and paramecium. These single-celled organisms are fascinating because of their complexity and their role in aquatic environments and sometimes in disease. Understanding these different microorganisms helps us see how diverse and vital they are in our world, connecting directly to the overall theme of the importance of microorganisms in health, environment, and industry. Let's take a closer look at viruses, which are a key part of understanding infectious agents. Viruses are tiny infectious particles that can only reproduce inside the cells of a host organism. They're unique because they aren't considered alive in the traditional sense. They lack cellular structure and metabolic processes of their own. Instead, they hijack the machinery of host cells to replicate. This makes them particularly tricky to combat, as they can evolve rapidly and evade immune responses. Understanding viruses is crucial because they're responsible for many diseases, from the common cold to more severe illnesses like influenza and COVID-19. Their ability to mutate and spread quickly highlights the importance of effective prevention, diagnosis, and treatment strategies. Connecting this to the overall theme, studying viruses helps us better understand how infectious diseases spread and how we can protect ourselves and public health. Let's talk about whether microorganisms are friends or foes. They play a really important role in our lives. Some microorganisms are beneficial and help us in many ways, while others can be harmful and cause diseases. For example, microorganisms are used to make some of our favorite foods. When we make curd from milk, a bacterium called lactobacillus is involved. It reproduces in the milk and helps convert it into curd, which is a nutritious and tasty dairy product. Similarly, in baking, yeast, a type of fungus, is essential. It reproduces in the dough and produces carbon dioxide during respiration. That carbon dioxide makes the dough soft and puffy, which is how we get bread, cakes, biscuits, and pastries. So, microorganisms can be our friends when used properly, helping us produce delicious foods. But we also need to be cautious, because some microorganisms can cause illnesses. It's all about understanding their role and using them wisely. Now, let's talk about the commercial use of microorganisms. They play a crucial role in the large-scale production of products like alcohol, wine, and acetic acid, which is essentially vinegar. Yeast, in particular, is widely used for making alcohol and wine. The process involves growing yeast on natural sugars that are found in grains such as barley, wheat, and rice, as well as crushed fruit juices. This process is called fermentation, and it's fascinating because it converts sugar into alcohol. Interestingly, fermentation was discovered by Louis Pasteur back in 1857, which was a groundbreaking moment in microbiology and industrial applications. Understanding this process helps us see how microorganisms are essential not just in nature, but also in many of the products we use daily. Whenever you fall ill, your doctor might prescribe you antibiotics, like tablets, capsules, or even injections, such as penicillin. Now, here's something interesting. The source of these medicines actually comes from microorganisms themselves. These medicines are called antibiotics. Today, many antibiotics are produced from bacteria and fungi. For example, some well-known antibiotics include streptomycin, tetracycline, and erythromycin. The key thing to remember is that these medicines work by killing or stopping the growth of the microorganisms that cause diseases. This connection between microorganisms and medicines highlights how vital these tiny organisms are in our fight against illnesses, and ties back to our overall theme of understanding the importance of microorganisms in our health. When it comes to antibiotics, it's really crucial to remember that they should only be taken on the advice of a qualified doctor. Never self-medicate or start antibiotics without proper guidance. It's also very important to finish the entire course prescribed by your doctor, even if you start feeling better before it's over. Skipping doses or stopping early can make the medication less effective in the future, and that's something we definitely want to avoid. Taking antibiotics unnecessarily or in incorrect doses can also be harmful because it may kill beneficial bacteria in our bodies. These good bacteria are important for our overall health and immune function. And a key point to keep in mind is that antibiotics are not effective against colds and flu, since those are caused by viruses. Using antibiotics for viral infections doesn't help and can contribute to antibiotic resistance. So always follow your healthcare provider's advice. Use antibiotics responsibly, and remember that they are just one part of a broader approach to staying healthy. In 1929, Alexander Fleming was working with a culture of bacteria that caused disease. One day, he noticed something unusual. A mold had contaminated his plate, and he saw that the bacteria around the mold weren't growing. In fact, the bacteria were dying where the mold was present. This was a groundbreaking discovery. It showed that the mold produced a substance that could kill bacteria. That mold is what we now know as penicillin. This discovery marked the beginning of modern antibiotics and revolutionized medicine by providing an effective way to fight bacterial infections. It's a perfect example of how observation and curiosity can lead to life-saving innovations. When a disease-carrying microbe enters our body, our immune system responds by producing antibodies to fight off the invader. These antibodies are crucial because they help us combat the disease if we're exposed again in the future. The remarkable part is that our body remembers how to fight the microbe, which is the basis for immunity. Now, when we introduce dead or weakened microbes through a vaccine, it triggers this immune response without making us sick. Our body recognizes these microbes as threats and produces the right antibodies to fight them. These antibodies stay in our system, providing us with long-term protection against diseases. This is essentially how a vaccine works, by training our immune system to defend us more effectively. Vaccination has been a powerful tool in preventing many serious diseases like cholera, tuberculosis, smallpox, and hepatitis. So, in the context of overall health and disease prevention, vaccines are a key part of protecting ourselves and our communities. They help us stay healthy by preventing the spread of infectious diseases before they can cause harm. Now, let's talk about increasing soil fertility. Some bacteria and blue-green algae have a really important role here. They are able to fix nitrogen from the atmosphere, which means they can convert that nitrogen into a form that plants can actually use. This process naturally enriches the soil with nitrogen, making it more fertile and healthier for plant growth. These special microbes are often called biological nitrogen fixers. They are essential because they help maintain soil health without the need for chemical fertilizers, supporting sustainable agriculture and ecosystem balance. So, in essence, these tiny organisms play a big part in boosting soil fertility and ensuring plants get the nutrients they need to thrive. Have you ever noticed large amounts of dead organic matter, like decaying plants or even dead animals, on the ground? Well, what happens to all that waste? You might be surprised to learn that over time, it gradually disappears. The reason for this is the incredible work of microorganisms. These tiny organisms break down dead organic waste from plants and animals, turning it into simple substances. And what's really fascinating is that these substances don't just disappear. They get reused by other plants and animals, completing a natural cycle. So, microorganisms play a vital role in cleaning up our environment by degrading harmful and foul-smelling substances. This process helps keep our surroundings healthy and balanced, which ties into the overall theme of how nature maintains ecological harmony. Harmful microorganisms can cause a lot of problems in our lives. Some of these tiny organisms are responsible for diseases not only in humans, but also in plants and animals. We call these disease-causing microorganisms pathogens. They can enter our bodies through the air we breathe, the water we drink, or the food we eat. Sometimes, transmission happens through direct contact with an infected person or even through animals. It's important to understand that when a disease can spread from one person to another through air, water, food, or physical contact, we call these communicable diseases. Examples include cholera, the common cold, chickenpox, and tuberculosis. For instance, when someone with a cold sneezes, they release tiny droplets of moisture into the air. These droplets can carry thousands of viruses. If another person breathes in those droplets, the virus can enter their body and cause illness. This highlights how easily these microorganisms can spread, and why good hygiene and preventive measures are so essential in protecting ourselves and others from these diseases. Today, I want to talk about some harmful microorganisms that are actually carried by insects and animals. These creatures are known as carriers because they can transfer disease-causing microbes from one place to another. One common carrier is the housefly. Flies tend to sit on garbage and animal excreta, and during this process, pathogens stick to their bodies. When these flies land on uncovered food, they can transfer those pathogens directly onto our food. If someone eats that contaminated food, they are very likely to get sick. Another important carrier is the mosquito. Specifically, the female Anopheles mosquito is known to carry the parasite that causes malaria, while the female Aedes mosquito is a carrier of the dengue virus. Both of these mosquitoes breed in water, which makes water collection a major concern. If water is allowed to stagnate in coolers, tires, flower pots, or any other container, it creates the perfect breeding ground for mosquitoes. This highlights the importance of keeping our surroundings clean and dry. By doing so, we can significantly reduce mosquito breeding and help prevent the spread of these dangerous diseases. Remember, controlling the environment is a key step in protecting ourselves and our communities from these health threats. Let's take a closer look at some common human diseases caused by microorganisms and how they spread. Tuberculosis, for example, is caused by bacteria and spreads through the air when an infected person coughs or sneezes. To prevent it, we need to keep the patient in complete isolation and ensure their personal belongings don't come into contact with others. Vaccinations are also crucial and should be given at the appropriate age. Moving on to diseases like measles, chicken pox, and polio, all are caused by viruses and also spread through the air, often via coughs and sneezes. Preventive measures include vaccinations and maintaining good hygiene practices. Cholera and typhoid are caused by bacteria and typically spread through contaminated water or food. To prevent these, it's important to maintain personal hygiene, practice good sanitary habits, consume properly cooked food, and drink boiled water. Vaccinations are also available and recommended. Hepatitis A, caused by a virus, spreads mainly through contaminated water. Drinking boiled water and getting vaccinated are effective ways to protect yourself. Lastly, malaria is caused by a protozoa transmitted by mosquitoes. To prevent malaria, we should use mosquito nets and repellents, spray insecticides, and control mosquito breeding by eliminating standing water around our homes. Understanding these transmission modes helps us take targeted preventive measures, which is key in controlling the spread of these diseases and protecting public health. Let's talk about some microorganisms that cause diseases not only in humans and plants, but also in animals. For example, anthrax is a particularly dangerous disease that affects both humans and cattle, and it's caused by a specific type of bacteria. Another example is foot and mouth disease, which impacts cattle and is caused by a virus. It's interesting to note that the discovery of the bacterium Bacillus anthracis, which is responsible for anthrax, was made by Robert Kirch back in 1876. This highlights how important it is to understand these microorganisms, as they can impact a wide range of species, not just humans. Recognizing these pathogens helps us develop better prevention and control strategies across different animals and even in agriculture. Today, I want to talk about disease-causing microorganisms in plants. As we've seen, several types of microbes can infect important crops like wheat, rice, potatoes, sugarcane, oranges, apples, and many others. These diseases are a significant problem because they directly reduce the crop yields, which impacts food supply and farmers' livelihoods. What's crucial to understand is that these microorganisms are the culprits behind many plant diseases. They can be bacteria, fungi, viruses, or other pathogens that invade the plant tissues. Now, to manage these problems, farmers often use specific chemicals, fungicides, bactericides, or other antimicrobial agents that are designed to kill or inhibit these microbes. Proper use of these chemicals is essential for controlling the spread of disease and protecting our crops. So, understanding which microorganisms cause these diseases and how to combat them is a key part of ensuring healthy plants and stable food production, tying into our overall theme of sustainable agriculture and plant health management. Let's take a look at some common plant diseases caused by microorganisms. First up is citrus canker, which is caused by bacteria. This disease spreads primarily through the air, making it quite contagious and challenging to control. Next, we have rust of wheat, a fungal disease. Rust can spread through both air and seeds, so contamination can occur in multiple ways, emphasizing the importance of seed health and air circulation. Finally, there's yellow vein mosaic of bindi, or okra, which is caused by a virus. Interestingly, this virus is transmitted by insects, highlighting how pests can play a significant role in spreading viral diseases among plants. These examples really underscore the various ways microorganisms can infect plants, through the air, seeds, or insects, and how understanding these modes of transmission is crucial in managing and preventing plant diseases. This knowledge helps us develop better control strategies, ensuring healthier crops and more sustainable agriculture. Food can spoil because of microorganisms, which cause bad smell, bad taste, and even food poisoning. To prevent this, we need to preserve food by protecting it from these microbes. There are several methods to do this effectively. One common way is the chemical method, where we use chemicals like salts and edible oils, especially for foods like pickles. For jams and squashes, preservatives such as sodium benzoate and sodium metabisulfite are used. These are called preservatives because they help keep the food safe for longer. Another simple method is using sugar. For products like jams, jellies, and squashes, a sugar solution can prevent microbes from growing, acting as a natural preservative. We also preserve food by applying heat or cold. Heating food kills the microbes present, while storing food at low temperatures, like in refrigerators, slows down microbial growth. Using common salt is another traditional method. It's especially effective for preserving fish, meat, amla, raw mangoes, and tamarind. Salt creates an environment where microbes can't thrive. Lastly, oil and vinegar are often used to preserve items like pickles, vegetables, fish, and meat. They create an acidic or oily environment that inhibits microbial growth. All these methods are important because they help us keep food safe and edible for longer, connecting to our overall goal of maintaining food quality and safety. Let's talk about pasteurization. This is a process where we gently heat milk to about 70 degrees C, and we keep it at that temperature for around 15 to 30 seconds. The key here is that it's a very quick process. After that, we immediately cool the milk down. This sudden chilling is crucial because it stops any microbes from growing back. The main goal of pasteurization is to make milk safer to drink by destroying harmful bacteria, but without affecting its quality too much. This process was discovered by Louis Pasteur, which is why it bears his name. In the bigger picture, pasteurization is a vital step in ensuring the safety and shelf life of dairy products, fitting into our overall theme of food safety and processing. It's a simple yet effective method that has had a huge impact on public health. Let's talk about the nitrogen cycle. The nitrogen in our atmosphere, which makes up about 78% of the air we breathe, doesn't just stay there. It gets converted into nitrogen compounds in the soil through a fascinating process involving nitrogen-fixing bacteria and blue-green algae. These tiny organisms play a crucial role in making atmospheric nitrogen usable for living things. Lightning also contributes to this process by converting nitrogen into nitrogen compounds during thunderstorms, adding to the pool of usable nitrogen in the soil. Once in the soil, these nitrogen compounds are essential nutrients for plants. They use them to synthesize proteins and other vital compounds necessary for growth and development. When animals eat these plants, they acquire these proteins and compounds, which are essential for their survival. But the cycle doesn't stop there. When plants and animals die, bacteria and fungi in the soil break down their bodies and waste, converting nitrogenous materials back into nitrogen compounds. This process ensures that nitrogen remains available in the soil for plants to reuse. Interestingly, some bacteria have the ability to convert nitrogen compounds in the soil into nitrogen gas, which then escapes back into the atmosphere. This process helps maintain a balance, so the amount of nitrogen in the atmosphere remains nearly constant over time. Overall, the nitrogen cycle is a perfect example of nature's balance, constantly recycling nitrogen to sustain life on Earth, which ties into our broader understanding of ecological cycles and how interconnected everything is. Now, let's talk about an interesting activity you can try at home or in the classroom. Take some soil and put it into a clear glass container. Then, fill that container with tap water. Place it in a spot where it can get sunlight. After a few days, you'll notice something happening on the surface of the water. A green layer will start to form. What you're seeing is a growth of microorganisms, specifically algae, which thrive in sunlight and moist environments. When you observe this layer closely with a magnifying glass, you can see tiny green structures moving or floating. So the key point here is that soil contains microorganisms like algae, which can grow under the right conditions, like sunlight and water. This activity helps us understand the presence and role of microorganisms in our environment. It also illustrates how these tiny life forms can be observed directly, connecting to the larger theme of microbial diversity and their importance in nature. Let's look at Activity 1. First, take half a kilogram of flour, whether it's atta or maida, and add a little sugar. Mix this together with warm water to help activate the ingredients. Then, add a small amount of yeast powder. Knead everything together until you get a soft, pliable dough. Now, the key points here are observing what happens after 2 hours. What do you notice? Does the dough look different? Is it rising? This activity helps us understand how yeast ferments the sugars in the dough, producing carbon dioxide, which causes the dough to rise. It's a simple but powerful demonstration of fermentation in action. So after 2 hours, you'll likely see the dough has expanded or become airy. That's the rising process at work. This is a fundamental concept because it shows how biological activity, yeast in this case, can change the physical properties of the dough, which is essential not just in baking, but in understanding fermentation processes broadly. All right, now let's move on to Activity 2. Take a 500 ml beaker and fill it up to about 3/4 with water. Next, dissolve 2 to 3 teaspoons of sugar into the water. Once the sugar has dissolved, add half a spoon of yeast powder to the mixture. Cover the beaker and place it in a warm area, allowing it to sit undisturbed for about 4 to 5 hours. After this time, carefully smell the solution. You might notice a distinct aroma, perhaps a yeasty or fermenting smell. This smell indicates that fermentation is taking place as the yeast breaks down the sugars. So, can you smell it? And what kind of smell do you detect? Recognizing these smells helps us understand the activity of yeast and the process of fermentation, which ties into our overall discussion on biological processes and how organisms convert substances. Now let's move on to Activity 3. First, take 2 pots and fill each one halfway with soil. Label them as Pot A and Pot B. In Pot A, put plant waste, things like vegetable peels or leaves. In Pot B, add non-biodegradable waste such as polythene bags, empty glass bottles, and broken plastic toys. Once you've done that, set the pots aside and give it some time, about 3 to 4 weeks. After this period, observe what has happened inside each pot. Do you notice any difference? If so, what is it? This activity helps us understand how organic waste decomposes naturally, enriching the soil, whereas non-biodegradable waste does not break down easily and can persist in the environment for a long time. This experiment highlights the importance of proper waste management and composting, which ties into our overall theme of environmental conservation. It shows us the impact of our waste choices and encourages us to reduce, reuse, and recycle to protect our planet. Let's think about Activity 4 and explore some interesting questions. First, why do you think curd sets faster in summer than in winter? Well, warmer temperatures speed up the fermentation process because bacteria are more active, so curd forms quicker. Conversely, in winter, the cooler environment slows down bacterial activity, making curd take longer to set. Now, why does curd turn sour faster in summer? Again, higher temperatures promote bacterial growth and fermentation, which leads to souring of the curd more quickly. Next, consider the sealed packets of food items like chips that are filled with nitrogen. Do you know how that helps? Yes, nitrogen is an inert gas that displaces oxygen inside the packet. This prevents oxidation and growth of bacteria and fungi, keeping the chips fresh and crispy for longer. Moving on, why is it important to always wash your hands before handling food and after visiting the toilet? Because our hands can carry germs, bacteria, and dirt. Washing hands removes these pathogens, preventing food contamination and the spread of infections. Now, let's talk about evolution. Charles Darwin suggested that evolution is a very slow process happening over thousands of generations and millions of years. But in bacteria, resistance to antibiotics develops much faster. Why is that? Because bacteria reproduce very quickly, often in just minutes, and mutations can happen rapidly. This quick reproduction and genetic change allow bacteria to develop resistance within our lifetime. Next, why are protozoa considered an important link in aquatic food chains? Protozoa serve as a food source for small aquatic animals, and in turn, they feed larger organisms. They help transfer energy up the food chain, making them vital for maintaining a healthy ecosystem. Despite most preservatives being chemicals, why do we still use them in our food? Because preservatives effectively prevent spoilage, inhibit bacterial and fungal growth, and extend shelf life, ensuring our food stays safe and fresh for longer periods. Now, if someone eats a dish of mutton and then experiences nausea, vomiting, diarrhea, and abdominal pain, what kind of disease might this be? It's likely a foodborne illness caused by bacteria or parasites present in improperly cooked or stored meat. The disease is caused mainly by bacteria like Salmonella or E. coli, or sometimes parasites. Finally, why do dry food items like biscuits not spoil easily? Because they contain very little moisture, which inhibits bacterial and fungal growth, keeping them preserved for long periods without refrigeration. That covers all these interesting points about food safety, preservation, and the role of microorganisms in our environment. Now, let's move on to the next question we need to answer. We're asked to differentiate between communicable and non-communicable diseases. These are fundamental concepts in understanding health issues. Communicable diseases are those that can be transmitted from one person to another, like the flu or tuberculosis. They often spread through contact with infected individuals, contaminated food or water, or vectors like mosquitoes. On the other hand, non-communicable diseases are not contagious. They tend to develop over time due to genetic, environmental, or lifestyle factors. Examples include heart disease, diabetes, and certain cancers. Recognizing the difference is crucial because it influences how we prevent and control these diseases. For communicable diseases, we focus on hygiene, vaccination, and quarantine measures. For non-communicable diseases, emphasis is on healthy living, diet, and regular checkups. This distinction helps us tailor our health strategies effectively, which is vital in our overall goal of improving health outcomes. Let's go through some important questions to reinforce our understanding. First, why are antibiotics not useful in treating viral infections? Well, antibiotics target bacteria, not viruses. Since viruses have a different structure and reproduce differently, antibiotics can't affect them. That's why antiviral medicines are used instead for viral illnesses. Next, why is milk stored in the refrigerator during summers? Because high temperatures can cause milk to spoil faster. Keeping it cold slows down bacterial growth, helping the milk stay fresh longer and preventing foodborne illnesses. Now, are all microorganisms harmful? Not at all. Many microorganisms are beneficial. For example, some bacteria help in digestion, and fungi like yeast are used in baking and brewing. So, microorganisms can be both helpful and harmful depending on the type. Moving on, what is the difference between algae and protozoa? Algae are plant-like microorganisms that produce their own food through photosynthesis, while protozoa are animal-like microorganisms that move around and consume other organisms for energy. Let's switch to short answer questions. How are viruses different from other microbes? Viruses are much smaller, and unlike bacteria or fungi, they can't reproduce on their own. They need a host cell to multiply, which makes them unique and sometimes more difficult to control. What is the role of nitrogen-fixing bacteria in soil? These bacteria convert atmospheric nitrogen into a form that plants can absorb and use for growth, enriching the soil and supporting healthy plant development. How do microorganisms help in cleaning the environment? Microorganisms break down waste materials, including sewage and organic matter, into simpler substances, which helps in cleaning and maintaining a healthy environment. What are antibiotics, and what precautions should be taken when using them? Antibiotics are medicines that kill or inhibit bacteria. It's important to take them exactly as prescribed, complete the full course, and avoid misuse to prevent antibiotic resistance. Now, moving to long answer questions. Why are bacteria regarded as both foes and friends? Because some bacteria cause diseases and infections, making them foes. But others are beneficial. They help in digestion, produce medicines, and even clean up pollutants, making them our friends. How are bacteria, protozoa, and viruses harmful to mankind? Bacteria can cause infections like tuberculosis. Protozoa can cause diseases such as malaria. Viruses can lead to illnesses like influenza and COVID-19. Each has a different way of affecting our health. Finally, what is fermentation, and how is it used in making alcoholic beverages? Fermentation is a process where microorganisms like yeast convert sugars into alcohol and carbon dioxide. This process is essential in brewing beer, making wine, and producing other alcoholic drinks, giving them their characteristic flavors. All right, let's take a closer look at this table. Here, we're asked to complete the information for several diseases, focusing on their causes, symptoms, and prevention methods. Starting with malaria, it's caused by a parasite transmitted through the bite of infected Anopheles mosquitoes. The symptoms usually include high fever, chills, sweating, and sometimes headaches or nausea. To prevent malaria, using mosquito nets, eliminating standing water where mosquitoes breed, and taking anti-malarial medications when traveling to high-risk areas are key strategies. Next, amoebic dysentery is caused by a parasite called Entamoeba histolytica. It spreads through contaminated food and water, leading to symptoms like severe diarrhea, abdominal pain, and dehydration. Prevention mainly involves drinking clean, safe water, maintaining good hygiene, and proper sanitation. Moving on to measles, which is caused by the measles virus. It spreads easily through respiratory droplets, and symptoms typically include a high fever, cough, runny nose, and a distinctive rash. Vaccination is the most effective prevention method here, along with good hygiene practices to reduce spread. Then we have tuberculosis, or TB, caused by the bacteria Mycobacterium tuberculosis. It primarily affects the lungs, causing symptoms like persistent cough, chest pain, weight loss, and night sweats. Preventing TB involves vaccination with BCG, proper ventilation, and early detection and treatment of cases. Finally, hepatitis B is caused by the hepatitis B virus, which affects the liver. It spreads through contact with infected blood or body fluids, and symptoms can include jaundice, fatigue, and abdominal pain. Prevention is mainly through vaccination, avoiding sharing needles, and practicing safe sex. So, in summary, understanding the causes helps us know how these diseases spread. Recognizing symptoms allows for early detection, and prevention strategies are crucial to reducing their impact. This table really ties into the overall theme of how we can protect ourselves and our communities from infectious diseases.